Um, I've been broke twice in my life. Really broke. Not I can't afford the nice restaurant broke. More like um, I don't know if I can make rent broke. And both times were the best education I ever got. Better than Stanford, better than any book, better than any mentor, because going broke teaches you things that prosperity never will. The first time was in my early 20s. Um, I dropped out of Stanford after 2 days to start Zip 2 with my brother. We had no money. I mean, none. We rented a tiny office and I just lived there. Slept on a beanbag, showered at the YMCA, ate the cheapest food I could find. There were days I wasn't sure we'd make it another week. That period taught me something crucial. You don't actually need much to survive. All the stuff people think they need, they don't. You need food, water, shelter, and a purpose. Everything else is optional. Once you've lived without the everything else, you realize how much of modern life is just consumption theater. People buying things to impress other people who aren't paying attention. When you're broke, that theater disappears. You can't participate. And you know what? It's liberating. You're not trying to keep up with anyone. You're just trying to survive. And in that survival mode, you learn what actually matters. Solving the problem in front of you, making progress, building something, not what car you drive or what watch you wear. The second time I was broke was way worse because I was older and supposedly successful. This was 2008. Tesla was hemorrhaging cash. SpaceX had failed 3 rocket launches. I was going through a divorce. And I was personally broke. Not company broke, me broke. I'd put everything into these companies and I had nothing left. I remember calling friends and asking if I could sleep on their couch at 40 years old after selling PayPal for $165 million. It was humiliating. People thought I'd lost my mind. Why don't you just shut down these stupid companies and salvage what you can? Because that would have meant admitting failure. And I'd rather be broke than be someone who quit. So I scraped together everything I could find, borrowed money, convinced investors to put in one more round, and we made it through by the skin of our teeth. But that period, those months of not knowing if we'd survive, that was the crucible. That's where you find out what you're made of. Here's what going broke teaches you that nothing else can. First, it teaches you resourcefulness. When you have money, you solve problems by throwing money at them. Need to hire someone? Pay them. Need a service? Buy it. Need to move faster? Spend more. Money makes you lazy because it creates the illusion that everything's solvable with capital. When you're broke, you can't do that. You have to get creative. You have to figure out how to solve problems with no resources. You have to negotiate. You have to trade. You have to build things yourself. That resourcefulness is worth more than any amount of capital because it's a skill that stays with you forever. Second, it teaches you what's important. When you have money, you waste it on stupid things. Fancy dinners, expensive clothes, gadgets you use once. When you're broke, every dollar is allocated with precision. You ask yourself, do I actually need this or do I just want it? Most of the time, you don't need it. That clarity is invaluable because once you know what you actually need versus what you think you need, you can't be manipulated by advertising or social pressure or any of the other forces trying to get you to spend money. You become immune to lifestyle inflation. And immunity to lifestyle inflation is one of the most valuable traits you can have. Third, going broke teaches you humility. When you have money, it's easy to think you're smart. You made good decisions. You're talented. You deserve success. Then you go broke and you realize how fragile everything is, how much was luck, how much was timing, how little control you actually have. That humility makes you better at everything because you stop being arrogant and start being careful. I see people who've never been broke and they have this confidence that's actually just ignorance. They think they can't fail. They take stupid risks because they've never experienced consequences. They treat money carelessly because they've never had to go without. And eventually reality catches up with them. But by then they're older and the recovery is harder. If you go broke young, you recover fast. You've got energy, you've got time, you've got nothing to lose because you already lost it. That's the perfect setup for a comeback. But if you go broke at 60 because you never learned the lessons, that's a tragedy. You don't have time to rebuild. You don't have the energy. You just broke. Um, Fourth, going broke teaches you risk management. When you're comfortable, you don't think about worst case scenarios. Why would you? Everything's fine. Um, but when you've been broke, you always have a part of your brain running simulations. What if this goes wrong? What if that fails? How would I survive? That paranoia is actually a superpower because it keeps you from doing catastrophically stupid things. Um, After 2008, I never let myself get in that position again. Um, I always kept some cash reserves. I always had backup plans. I always thought about what would happen if everything went wrong simultaneously. That thinking saved me multiple times because bad things do happen. Markets crash, companies fail, plans fall apart. And if you haven't thought about survival, you won't survive. Let me tell you about someone I know. Made a fortune in real estate in the 2000s, owned dozens of properties, was worth maybe 20 million at the peak, felt invincible. Then 2008 hit and he was leveraged to the eyeballs. Properties went underwater, banks called loans. Within a year, he was bankrupt, lost everything. But here's the interesting part. 5 years later, he was back. Not as rich as before, but comfortable. Owned a few properties free and clear, had learned his lesson about leverage. And he told me the bankruptcy was the best thing that ever happened to him because it forced him to rebuild from scratch with better principles. He said, I thought I knew what I was doing. I didn't. Going broke taught me. That's the pattern I see over and over. People who've never been broke are fragile. One bad break and they're finished. People who've been broke and recovered are anti-fragile. They know how to survive. They've done it before. They can do it again. That confidence, the real kind, built on experience, not ego, that's what makes you wealthy forever. Now, I'm not saying you should deliberately go broke. That would be stupid. What I'm saying is, if you do go broke, it's not the end. It's an education. And if you're willing to learn the lessons, you'll come back stronger, smarter, and ultimately wealthier than you would have been otherwise. The lessons are simple, but they're not obvious until you live them. Live below your means, always. Save aggressively. Invest in assets, not liabilities. Avoid debt like poison. Stay liquid enough to survive disasters. Think long term, even when everyone else is thinking short term. These aren't complicated, but knowing them intellectually and living them experientially are completely different. I knew I should save money before I went broke, but I didn't really understand why until I needed money and didn't have it. I knew debt was dangerous before 2008, but I didn't really feel it until I was drowning in obligations I couldn't meet. You can read about fire, but until you get burned, you don't respect it. Going broke is the burn that teaches respect. Um, Here's another thing. Going broke filters your relationships. When you have money, you're surrounded by people. Some are genuine, most aren't. They're around because of what you can do for them. Access, opportunities, status. When you go broke, those people disappear instantly. It's clarifying. The people who stick around when you have nothing, those are your real friends. Everyone else was just networking. I learned this in 2008. Friends I thought were close vanished, didn't return calls, suddenly too busy. Meanwhile, people I barely knew stepped up, offered help, gave advice, put money in when everyone else was pulling out. You find out who people really are when you can't do anything for them anymore. Um, that knowledge is priceless. Going broke also recalibrates your sense of risk. Before you've been broke, big numbers are scary. I can't invest $50,000. What if I lose it? After you've been broke, you realize losing 50,000 isn't the end of the world. You've survived having nothing. 50,000 is a luxury problem. That mental shift lets you take bigger, smarter risks because you're not paralyzed by fear of loss. When I put 100 million into SpaceX, people thought I was crazy. You could lose everything. I'd already lost everything in 2008. I knew I could survive it. So the risk didn't feel as scary to me as look from the outside. I'd been to the bottom. I knew the way back. That made me bolder than someone who'd never failed. There's also something about being broke that strips away pretension. When you're sleeping on a couch at 40, you can't pretend you're better than anyone. You can't look down on people. You're at the bottom with everyone else who's struggling. That perspective stays with you. Even after you rebuild, you remember what it feels like to have nothing. It makes you more empathetic, more real, less of an asshole. I see rich people who've never struggled and they have this entitled attitude. They think they're special. They think poor people are poor because they're lazy or stupid. It's disgusting. If you've been broke, you know that's not true. You know how hard it is to climb out. You know how much is luck and timing. You respect the struggle because you've lived it. Let me give you a practical example of how going broke makes you wealthy. When I was broke at 24, I learned to live on almost nothing. That skill never left me. Even after I made money, I still lived cheaply by choice. Didn't buy a house until I was in my 30s, drove used cars, lived simply. All the money I would have wasted on a lifestyle, I invested instead. That discipline came directly from being broke. If I'd never been broke, I probably would have spent like a typical newly rich person, big house, fancy cars, expensive hobbies, and I'd have been fine, comfortable, but not as wealthy as I became because the money I saved by living like I was still broke compounded into enormous sums. Going broke taught me frugality. Frugality created surplus capital. Surplus capital created wealth. Here's another lesson from being broke. You learn to distinguish between assets and liabilities. When you have no money, you can't buy anything that doesn't directly contribute to your survival or your ability to make money. No room for luxuries. No room for things that look good but do nothing. Everything has to be functional. That filter stays with you. After Zip2 sold, I had 22 million. I could have bought a Ferrari. I didn't. Not because I couldn't afford it, because I'd been broke and I knew a Ferrari was a liability. It would cost me money to maintain, depreciate, and value and produce zero return. So I bought stock in my next company instead. The stock appreciated. The Ferrari would have depreciated. Being broke taught me that distinction. Most people never learn it. They make money and immediately upgrade their lifestyle. Bigger house, fancier car, more expensive, everything. Then they're trapped on a treadmill, needing to make more just to maintain what they've bought. They're rich in assets that cost money, poor in assets that make money. If they'd been broke, they'd know better. Going broke also teaches you patience. When you're broke, you can't have instant gratification. You have to wait. You have to delay. You have to prioritize. That patience is a muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it gets. And patience in investing is probably the single most valuable trait you can have. I've made my biggest returns by being patient, holding Tesla stock when everyone said to sell, keeping SpaceX private when everyone said to IPO. I bought stock in my next company instead. The stock appreciated. The Ferrari would have depreciated. Being broke taught me that distinction. Most people never learn it. They make money and immediately upgrade their lifestyle. Bigger house, fancier car, more expensive, everything. Then they're trapped on a treadmill, needing to make more just to maintain what they've bought. They're rich in assets that cost money, poor in assets that make money. If they'd been broke, they'd know better. Going broke also teaches you patience. When you're broke, you can't have instant gratification. You have to wait. You have to delay. You have to prioritize. That patience is a muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it gets. And patience in investing is probably the single most valuable trait you can have. I've made my biggest returns by being patient, holding Tesla stock when everyone said to sell, keeping SpaceX private when everyone said to IPO, waiting for the right opportunities instead of forcing bad ones. That patience came from being broke and learning that sometimes the best move is no move. Just survive, just wait, just let time work for you. Impatient people stay poor. They need results now. They need gratification now. They need to see progress immediately. So they make impulsive decisions. They chase hot stocks. They jump from opportunity to opportunity. They never let anything compound. Being broke teaches you that compounding takes time and you need to sit still and let it happen. There's also a psychological benefit to having been broke. Once you've survived it, you're not afraid of it anymore. Most people's biggest financial fear is going broke. That fear controls them, makes them play it safe, makes them stay in jobs they hate, makes them accept mediocrity because it's secure. If you've already been broke and survived, that fear has no power over you. You know the monster, you fought it, you won. That fearlessness is incredibly valuable. It lets you walk away from bad situations. It lets you take calculated risks. It lets you negotiate from a position of strength because you're not desperate. Desperation shows. People can smell it and they exploit it. But if you've been broke before and you know you can survive it again, you're never desperate. You're dangerous. I walked away from opportunities that would have made me comfortable because I knew they wouldn't make me great. Could I have been an engineer at some big company making 200,000 a year? Sure. Would I have been comfortable? Yes. Would I have built SpaceX or Tesla? No, because I wasn't afraid of being broke. I'd already done it. So I could take the harder path. Most people can't do that. They're too scared. They need the security. They need the regular paycheck. They need to know rent is covered. I get it. But that need for security costs them the shot at something extraordinary. Going broke early immunizes you against that fear. You've already lived the worst case scenario. Everything else is upside. Here's something else. Being broke teaches you how to hustle. When you have money, you can afford to be passive. Put money in an index fund. Wait. When you're broke, you have to actively create value. You have to sell something, build something, do something. That hustle, that constant motion, that's a habit that makes you wealthy. Even after I had money, I kept hustling, not because I needed to, because I'd learned that motion creates opportunities. Sitting still doesn't. The universe rewards people who do things. It ignores people who wait for things to happen to them. Going broke taught me I had to make things happen. Nobody was coming to save me. That lesson stuck. Let me tell you about the best investment I ever made. It wasn't Tesla, it wasn't SpaceX, it was the 3 years I spent broke in my 20s building Zip2. I invested my time, my energy, and my sanity into something with a completely uncertain outcome. No salary, no security, just belief that it would work. That investment returned $22 million. But more importantly, it taught me how to build something from nothing. That skill is worth more than the money. If I'd taken a safe job, I'd have made maybe 200,000 over those 3 years. Comfortable, secure, and I'd have learned nothing except how to be an employee. By being broke and taking the risk, I learned how to be a builder, how to raise money, how to recruit, how to sell, how to survive when everything's going wrong. Those skills have made me billions. Being broke was the tuition. A lot of people think going broke is failure. It's not. Staying broke is failure. Going broke and not learning anything is failure. But going broke, learning the lessons, and using those lessons to rebuild, that's education. And it's the best education you can get because the stakes are real. You're not reading about failure in a case study. You're living it. The lessons go deep. I'll tell you who I worry about. People who've been successful their whole lives. Good family, good school, good job, good investments. Everything's always worked out. They've never faced real adversity, never been tested, never had to rebuild from zero. When something does go wrong, and eventually it will, they're not ready. They don't have the tools. They don't have the experience. They don't have the mental toughness, and they crumble. But someone who's been broke, they've got tools. They've got scars. They've got stories about surviving when survival wasn't guaranteed. That person is dangerous in the best way. You can't break them because they've already been broken and put themselves back together. They're anti-fragile. And in a world that's constantly changing and constantly challenging you, anti-fragile is the only thing worth being. So if you're broke right now, here's what I want you to know. It's not permanent. It's not a life sentence. It's a classroom. Pay attention. Learn the lessons. Resourcefulness, humility, patience, risk management, hustle. These lessons will make you wealthy if you apply them. Not immediately, not next week, but over time they compound into wisdom, and wisdom applied to capital creates wealth. And if you've never been broke, honestly, I almost feel bad for you because you're missing an education that money can't buy. You're missing the lessons that turn ordinary people into extraordinary builders. You're missing the fear and the struggle and the triumph that teaches you what you're really made of. Going broke once doesn't guarantee you'll be wealthy forever, but it gives you the tools to build wealth and the perspective to keep it. And that's more than most people ever get. The broke part teaches you to survive. Surviving teaches you to thrive. Thriving makes you wealthy. And once you've gone through that cycle, nobody can take it away from you. That's why going broke once will make you wealthy forever. Not because of the broke part, because of what you learn in the broke part. And if you learn those lessons, you never really go broke again. You might lose money, you might have setbacks, but you're never truly broke because you have something more valuable than money. You have knowledge, you have skills, you have the quiet confidence of someone who's been to the bottom and climbed back out. That's wealth that doesn't show up on a balance sheet, but it's the most valuable kind there is.